I should do an introduction. All right.
All dressed up, but nowhere to go.
Exactly.
I'm President of Collinwood for YouTube, Joel Sainz, joined by Gordon Demowski and Patrick McCray, author of the Dark Shadows Daybook Unbound. We're here to talk some more of The Prisoner, a very, very interesting episode. It's the episode before the ending, but it's the episode that should be the ending. It's Once Upon a Time. This is a very intense episode. What did you guys think of it when you first saw it?
It blew my mind. I mean, I that's a very 60s phrase, but it really did. I had never seen two characters who had kind of become a little familiar, certainly number six had, confront each other in this way to this degree, something to engage in that much psychobabble, yet kind of makes sense. And something, I think the making sense thing is a big deal because it makes just enough sense that I follow it and I basically understand this weird regressive thing that's going on, but it has enough mystery and elusiveness to it that it forces me to keep having to come back to it and think about what's going on. It's never an episode that is done, finished, over in my mind. There's always something more to happen.
Gordon?
Yeah, I mean, when I first saw it, I couldn't make heads or tails of it because it's very, I mean, it's a two-hander. You've got the intro with number two saying, I'm going to do it my way. I'm going to do this radical thing. Then you've got number six kind of being extreme in his behavior. And then it's basically two dudes and a butler in a room. And when you look at the back and forth when you first see it, it's like very weird. But when you watch it often enough, you get the sense that McGoohan, who wrote and directed this episode, is telling you all you need to know about number six without stating, here's the reason why he resigned. Because it is basically just a battle of wills. And um, when this episode was produced, first it came at the end of an initial 13 episode recording block. So uh, it was the ending episode of that block. But more importantly, um, things had gotten so intense between McGoohan and McKern that McKern at some point, and different stories vary whether he had some kind of attack, whether it was a heart attack or a nervous breakdown or some kind of panic attack, where it was just so intense between the two. And when you watch it in that light, it's not only about these you know, two strong-willed men basically trying to break each other, but it's also about really it reveals a lot about number six's character that maybe it's like McGoohan kind of maybe played his hand a little too easily, but that's okay because it's not, as Patrick has said, quoting someone that I can't remember, it's not what it's about, it's how it's about it.
It's very interesting. I like how when number six, or sorry, number two comes up and you see it's Liam McKern, he's he takes a drink of something, and the little guy, he comes in, the one man, he comes in who's been like the butler, and he just cuts a promo on him. He's like, just go. And then he's looking at number six, and then he picks up the phone, and he talks to him, and number six is like, I know your voice, it's familiar. He says, I've been here before. And he doesn't really get any answers out of him there. And it's interesting because that's when there's a very brief cut where McKern picks up the phone, and I believe he's talking to number one, but it's very brief that the guy who's the butler is in the room very briefly. It's not for long though. So if you want to debate whether he's number one or not, that's an
No,
interesting.
I don't think anyone of any kind of sanity honestly thinks that Angela Muscat's character is number one.
I think he's number one's narc.
Yeah, I was about to say number one lover. Yeah.
Yeah,
according to
he's
the-
like he's calling number one, saying, yeah, you know, this one number two is so lame. You know, he messed up the whole general thing. This other one tried to do this weird cowboy drug thing that didn't work. Yeah, you know, you got to get some quality in here because these people are all losers. You know what I mean? I mean, even one of them even let number six get all the way home before surprising him at his house. You know, like yeah, like the butler is not number one. He's the narc.
He
Yeah.
is. He is. I mean, his autobiography, What the Butler Saw.
I mean, I kind of expected at one point for the butler to like grab a metal folding chair and just whack number two in the back with it. Just pull a wrestling move just for the hell of it.
Which number two?
McKern.
Oh yeah, oh definitely. He's had it with this whole psychobabble nonsense.
Because
What do we-
because remember when number two when they're in the when they've regressed number six like being a schoolboy, it's the butler who has the cane and just got to give number six 12 lashes.
Yeah, and they say the show's not kinky. I mean, good God.
Yeah, we're not kink shaming Patrick McGowan here, but the guy obviously had some issues.
We're
Yeah.
celebrating Patrick McGowan and his desire to be caned by Angela Muscat in a butler's outfit. Emerson said, if a man's definition of happiness is to watch Patrick McGowan caned by Angela Muscat in a butler's outfit, then happiness he shall probably receive.
Yeah, and McGowan probably lost the footage, which is why it's not in the final episode.
I'm sure he lost the footage. Yeah. 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 They're going to spell Dr. Sin S-I-N.
Oh my god. This episode's very intense. I really like McKern and McGowan have great chemistry. I'm glad they got him to come back. I know he was under a lot of stress, and this episode, probably the fact that the way this episode's written and what the performance he has to give and what he has to do from a mental standpoint and let alone physical standpoint probably did not help his condition any. It's just very intense. You could tell the lighting was on. They were he was sweating, they were sweating, and did
Hot,
they?
Buddy men. Yes.
Here's a question: Did they know prior that McKern wasn't in good health?
I mean, look at him. It's not like he's he's got his own workout tape going on. I mean, he was in good health the way Winston Churchill was in good health. I mean, towards the end. Yeah. I mean, I love you, Leo, but bacon is not a vegetable.
Yeah, and keep in mind from a lot of the people who worked on the show, McGowan had very little sense of like he really went into it. In the general, which we'll watch at a later time, there's a scene where he's dealing with the actor's name is Mark Eden, and they're in a fight scene, and number six is kneeling down and choking him on screen. And usually when you're acting, you can figure out how to place your hands. But Eden in the documentary said, no, he feared for his life because McGowan was choking him. And I think McGowan was so single-minded. And Patrick, you could probably speak to this because this is, about directing. But like there's a way to frame violence or have an awareness of like actor safety where that's why you have fight arrangers and stunt coordinators.
Yeah.
But in that sense, you can tell that like McGowan is pretty much like, I don't even think it registered because he's like, I got to get this done. It's all on me. It's all on me. You know what I mean? I don't think he had that awareness. Whereas other directors might have thought, okay, how do we frame this? Even if it's just using different shots or clever editing where it looks like he nearly takes out McKern.
Here's what's really criminal about that. And I'm literally about that is that it's not like Patrick McGoohan hadn't done action shows before. It's not like he hadn't at some time in his career been the new guy on the set doing action scenes, working with fight choreographers and things like that. And no, they're not as concerned with the safety of the actors. Diana Rigg and Patrick McNee both talked about the fact that when they were doing pratfalls and flips and things like that in the Avengers, they were largely landing on concrete with a little bit of carpet on it. Not luxurious padding, but they still were not actually being hit or choked. And so, yes, Patrick McGoohan would not have made it as an actor if he had been trying to choke and attack older actors. That it's not that aggressive try to get away with suddenly when they're in a position of power because they can. The very first thing you learn in any fight choreography, and this is not recent stuff, is that the victim, it's a lot like other things. The victim is always in control. So choking, for instance, is one of the most basic moves. What you do is that if you're the aggressor, you put your hands near the throat of the other person and you try and pull them to either side. You put your arms away from the person's neck. Then the person who is suffering the choking grabs your wrists and tries to force them inward towards their neck. The muscular tension that you see is actually opposite of what's really going on. And guess what happens if the victim suddenly loses control? Well, your hands fly away from their neck rather than towards your neck. It's always the opposite of what aware of it. And he really could have been charged with assault. It's a horrible story, and I feel bad for that actor, and I feel bad for Leo McKern. I like Patrick McGoohan, but I mean, trying to choke someone.
Do you think they asked Leo McKern to do like a physical stunt he didn't want to do?
I think a physical stunt Leo McKern didn't want to do was probably getting up from the table and crossing the room to put on his jacket. This was not a very athletic man, So I don't know. I'm sure that Gordon, what do you know about that?
Well, again, I'm going to point back to a documentary called "Don't Knock Yourself Out," available on YouTube. There's a clip of McKern talking about it, and I guess his first day on the set, McGoohan comes to him and says, and I'll bleep the obscenity, "You're a funny little bleeper, aren't you?" And McKern said, "Oh," actually says he thought, "Oh, so it's going to be that kind of relationship." I do think that for like Chimes at Big Ben, like Chimes at Big Ben, I can kind of understand, okay, where, because there's not much asked of him. And I'm sure that when he read the script for Once Upon a Time, he probably, we'd have to look for interviews. He probably thought it was going to be more of a verbal sparring thing, or that like he's going into, you assume with any production that, okay, it's an ITV production, there's going to be stunt coordinators, like you're going to have the staff to make sure that there's safety. The fact that he had a panic attack when basically a fencing sword comes this close to his neck, and you can even see, and I don't know if it was fake, I'm assuming it's not fake, but he reaches his shoulder and he says, you missed, and you can see blood on his hand. I'm sure he was just like, that's why he probably just, I mean, they actually had to close the set for 2 days. Where it's,
that.
Yeah, I watched it this morning just to rewatch it because I'd watched it a few days ago, but I wanted to make sure that I saw what I thought I saw. But yeah, he says, "Oh, you missed," and you see his hand, and there's like a little bit of blood on the fingers, and I don't know if it was fake blood or if maybe he actually did have his shoulder tinged. But
I have seen actors who were a little too enthusiastic, and I hate to use the word method, but we know what method is symbolic of. Use things like real blades on the set all of a sudden on another actor. And, I've never been in that position because I'm not an actor, but I have seen very, very, very mature, rational people suddenly become absolutely fire and brimstone with their partners when a real blade comes out. That's just a thing you don't do. You just don't do that.
Yeah, and McGoohan makes a point in the scene, like the sword, the fencing swords have the rubber tips.
Yeah.
Because he pokes him with it, and then you literally see him stick it in the door, and then he like pops it off. So there's not even the.
Oh yeah, that's the point.
Yeah. So it'd be one thing like now you'd probably just use you'd use CGI to make the blade and just have him threaten. But like yeah, there's some scenes where it's like, most actors would say, hell no, you're not pointing that at me. I'm out of here.
Sure. I mean, the other way you do it is that you do it backwards. Before the camera rolls, you bury the sword in wherever it's supposed to go, right by your head, and then in the shot you pull it out of the wall, and it's going away from the person. And then you just run it backwards when you shoot it, and it looks terrific, and everyone's safe.
And kind of to touch on Jules' question from earlier about McKern's physicality, one of the things that happened to him, I did a little research. When he was an engineer's assistant when he was 16. There's an accident. He lost his left eye. So you're talking about someone who, because he has a glass eye, and if you look at the way he looks out, one eye is always that way, and the other eye is moving around.
So which side does he get the attack on?
I think it's his right side.
Oh, because it's terrifying either way.
Right, because
and then it disappears. The other way, of course, your only good eye.
Right, because when I was younger, I had an eye infection, and so I had to wear an eye patch. And when you have an eye patch, and it's your vision, you lose any depth of sense. So something coming at you, you don't really have that sense of it. So, so it was kind of like, I mean, I'm surprised that McKern agreed to come back in a few months for Fallout, because I think any other actor would have said, with Dance of the Dead, the actress who plays the kind of follower, the monitor.
Yeah.
The end scene was there's a scene where she and McGoohan were supposed to actually dance, Dance of the Dead. And the scene where McGoohan is like doing this? He refused to do it. She stormed off.
Oh, that guy.
Yeah, and it's funny too, because you can and this is probably going off the rails from where Jewel wanted to talk. But it's a very intense episode, and you need that high level of quality. But then there comes the issue of ethically, given that McGoohan staked a lot of his creative effort into this, at some point, the fact is, after, as around this time where he was told, you're only getting 4 episodes because you're overspending, and we can't sustain this past a certain number. At some point, you need to hear the no, and I don't think McGoohan allowed himself to ever hear the no.
Yeah, it could be one of the reasons why this was his last series as a showrunner.
Yeah,
first and last.
Yeah, and I don't think he ever did any. I mean, I'd have to look. I don't think he ever did any directing or writing or show running.
Other than for Peter Falk.
Well, no, I'm talking before.
Oh, yeah. No, he hadn't. This is a first and a last.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. The guy who gave the money for this show, they asked him, because I watched In Your Mind today, or In My Mind today, and they asked him, how did you get along with Patrick McGoohan? He goes, I told him okay, and I left him be. I gave him what he wanted. And it's just like, oh.
Yeah, see, this is why, like, this is why, like, when you this is why, like, in modern times with showrunners, it's you really need to have. Let me use a 1960s style structure for production. So you've got a producer and you've got a script editor. So let's use Patrick and I as examples. So Patrick's the producer, I'm the script editor, and I'm just going to throw out some very generalities. As producer, Patrick is responsible for budget, making sure we're on time, for directing, for costumes, for logistics, for like the actual mechanics of it. And as script editor, I'd be the one in charge of getting the scripts, making sure that I'm soliciting good stories, that I'm doing whatever editing and rewrites are done. And so, because at that point you've got a way to make sure that you're putting out consistent quality. At this point, McGoohan had a script editor, a gentleman by the name of George Markstein. He quit 7 episodes in because McGoohan was like, "This is my thing. It's my ego." Modern showrunners, let's use Dark Shadows. So like back in the day, Dan Curtis was the budget, logistics, maybe the rubber stamp guy, and Sam Hall was the head writer, for lack of a better term. I'm oversimplifying it, but it's like in modern times, if Mark Perry's Dark Shadows, not Resurrection, Reincarnation goes through, he's essentially in charge of the whole shebang. So he's got to coordinate with production, making sure they're on budget. He's hiring like script editors and writers, costuming, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But you only get that through working in the field. You know, a lot of British television, there's like a handful of writers that got through because, you know, one, it's a very kind of old school, old boy mentality, but you start putting people into certain slots and you kind of work your way up the ranks. With McGoohan, there's no evidence he's done, and if, for those who are watching, put them in the comments if I'm wrong, I don't think he had any directing or writing before this. I think it was all acting. I could be wrong, but you can see where he turned it from, here's this idea that I'd like to explore, to this is my masterpiece. And that's where a lot of times it's where, and I think this is an episode where it's a great episode, but I kind of look at it and go, is it really worth all the headaches that went into it?
At what cost?
Yeah. Well, like I was talking about stunts, just because even if like you're an athlete, it doesn't mean you should do what you're necessarily told. A great example in history is Sid Vicious. According to Vicious, Terry Taylor, a wrestling agent, told Vicious that he had to go up to the second rope, which Vicious never ever went to the top to the ropes in his life to go up, and to jump off at Steiner. And what happened was not a good result. I'll send you the video. It's very, very bad. And again, it just goes to show you, even if you are an athlete, it doesn't mean you should cave to somebody else's whim, because you could get hurt, you could get really badly messed up. But with this episode, there's a lot of craziness. I mean, he's trying to break number 6. So in you guys' opinion, does he break number 6?
Oh, that's the whole point of the episode.
Yeah.
Is the number him?
Yeah.
I mean, I may be too literal about that, but that's how I've always read it.
Yeah.
I'm going to be pedantic and ask, what do you mean by break? Because if you mean by break as in, does he get number 6 to say, I resigned because ... No, number 6 didn't break. If you're saying that if number 2's goal was to get as much information about what might have led to his resignation, yes, because we find out there's just things that are in the text that the scenes put out. First is that it seems like he might not have had a father, but he had a very domineering mother, because in the initial exchange it's master mother, father nothing. Um, he has a sense of honor. That is, he says himself, he's a fool but not a rat. He is not going to throw anyone else over the bus, and that's kind of one of his big principles, is protecting other people. He in one scene where he's thinking about, where he's kind of in a job interview, he's good with numbers. He There's a sense where he's talking about how he's, in his head, he's rushing for life and death emergency. So he's, he, again, it's that protectiveness. He also, you can push him to the point, but he will not kill, because he, not only do you have that scene, but you have the scene where he's like in a bomber, and he's told, hey, drop the bombs now, and he doesn't do it. Maybe we can suggest that maybe he was in the national service, so he wasn't in a war, but he was part of that kind of culture. And that, he may have even been taken prisoner for someone else at that point. And so I think what you have is, you've got a guy who, I think you can kind of guess that. I could see number two thinking, okay, he's very protective of others. He's not going to sell anyone out. He is, he probably knows stuff. And so he could probably put together a theory about, okay, he resigned because he just, again, last episode, Once Upon a Time, number 6 says it was a matter of conscience. You could easily draw make the rational case that number 6 just got tired, and he realized he was putting other people's lives on the line, and doing things that he did not want to do. So he just said, I'm out. Mm-hmm. That's all you really need. There'll be others who will watch this thing or hear me and go, you're wrong because da 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 da. But I think number 2 essentially broke number 6, but not in the way that you would think that he was broken.
I think what's really interesting is that he gets him to say certain things like state secret, and from a standpoint of did he get him the answer why he was on? No, but he got, like you said, he got enough hints out of it that you could take away suggestions of why he perhaps resigned. Maybe Magoon's character was ordered to kill somebody, and he just, didn't want to do that. Again, jobs, no matter what they are always about, your boss telling you what to do. Well, you either do that job or you get fired, or you either do that job or you don't, and you just quit and say, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to draw the line here. And when you work in whatever agency he is, whether he was a secret agent or not, it comes to the point of, if you're asking me to do this, yeah, okay, I'll do that. But if you're asking me to do this, nope, I'm drawing the line.
Well, let me maybe offer an example with some nuance, because with the prisoner, we're talking about someone in the espionage field. In my background, I worked in tobacco prevention, so I was working in Missouri to prevent kids from buying cigarettes and working with retailers, etc. And I had kind of, knowing what I know about the tobacco industry, and this was the early 2000s, so they were still very scummy. I kind of made a point to never work with the tobacco industry at all. And when I moved back to Chicago, there were a couple of advertising agencies that were like, I could have used the work, but they were working with clients like RJ Reynolds, Altria, etc. And I just had to go, no. And sometimes those kind of ethical issues are easy to make, because it's is a paycheck worth my integrity? Yeah. That's one example. But I think in number 6's case, it's not just a matter of your boss is telling you his bosses are telling him what to do. You're dealing with a much different set of ethics, where sometimes you have to make to quote Star Trek II, You have to outweigh the needs of the many against the needs of the few. You sometimes have to do things that you might find morally repellent, but are practical. And I think I don't think it's as simple a case of number 6 didn't like something his bosses said. There's a weight there. And the fact that in this episode, number 6 is so intense and so defensive, where even when he's at the thing where you would, if you or I were in that position, we'd probably say, okay, fine. Here's why I resigned. Leave me alone. Let me heal. But the fact that he's still adamant says, this is something really deep.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, it is. And I think McKern and McGowan do a really good job in this episode. Just great back and forth between each other. What's you guys' favorite scene in this episode?
For me, it's he wins at the end when he's recognized, I guess it's by the controller, as does he say, I'll take you to him? What do you want? Number 1, I'll take you to him. Isn't that it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, just the status. I mean, yeah, just any of the two-handers with McKern and McGowan are fantastic. But I think just the ultimate pure set that really, really gets me.
Yeah, I think my favorite scene, and it comes before one of the breaks, which is number 6 is lying on the table, and number 2 is bringing the hair dryer with the light behind it over him, like one of those weird devices, and as he turns it on, it starts to pulse. As the scene fades to black, McKern says, "I'm starting to really like him," and that's when you know that first, number 6 is winning, and number 2 is losing.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you don't really want to like the person you're trying to break. I guess my favorite scene in this whole thing is just more or less the psychology of it between the two. I mean, and it's throughout this whole episode. I mean, so just basically the whole episode. It's really well done, well performed, well acted, despite McKern having poor health and stuff. I don't hold nothing. I think he deserves a lot of credit for carrying a lot of the episode too. And I mean, he did just a fabulous job. Great actor, both great actors. I mean, they held nothing back, and that's something I like to see. Actors who are playing characters that hold nothing back, especially when you're close to your finale and you're building up to something even more. And it's just a really cool scene too. When I like the sequences in the cage most of all too. Just really, really good.
I think really that is the secret, that holding nothing back, especially Gastonly, was probably his only defense. And look at it. That's a formidable.
Hello?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Sorry. I thought you. Sorry about that. Gordon, is it your?
Yeah. Patrick. You're kind of breaking up. So.
Well, it's hard to do, but yes. Well, then I will I will leave you softly. I'm still on the road.
What did you think, Gordon?
Let's see. I think this is a really good episode. It's really strong. I mean, it's a very strong episode. It's a very well acted episode. And it's very well directed. I mean, it's a very sparse set. And I like the fact that it's. I mean, the other favorite scene that I liked, and it's just so incongruous. It's like it cuts from like a very intense, like number 6 is at like he's young, but then it cuts to that little like kitchen area, and number 6 is shaving, and number 2 is like washing his hands at the sink, and it's just so incongruous. It's like, okay, he's a prisoner, but he's like allowed to shave. But yeah, I mean, it's great because it really starts bringing everything together, and like as Patrick said before, it should have been the final episode because there's such a great, everything comes together. And I think having that where you end the series with having your number 6 taken off to meet number 1 and ending it there. First, you beat the Sopranos by 30 years with the ultimate. You don't have to worry about fallout because you end it there because asked, answered, move on. You don't need anything more than that. People would have been angry, but I think the whole point of The Prisoner is not about why did this guy leave. It's really a story about what happens when you are trying to be an individual in a society that insists that you have to, not just you have to conform, but it's also about our choices are our own. And I think ultimately it's McGoohan had been very notorious for saying things like, everything I said is there, don't talk to me about it, I don't want to talk about this. He was always very effusive, and you've seen in my mind, so how he kind of needed that kind of control over the narrative. I think one of the things that this episode shows is that this is a guy who, as much as he wants to keep things in, and maybe maybe for him this is about, but okay, I know a lot of writers, and I'm one of them, who might push their own personal stuff into their work. Not through like, are you familiar with the term Mary Sue in fan fiction? Okay, so some writers do that. I try to do it in terms of, okay, maybe instead of having a character represent me, it's like, okay, I stick some of these concerns in one person, some in another person, and they talk. Sometimes it's figuring out, okay, well, I want to rob a bank. Have a character who tries to rob a bank. I think McGoohan put a lot of himself into this, and I think including the stories that are about this episode, I think McGoohan lets his guard down in this episode, where he's talking. Ultimately, we figure out that like number 6 has just been tired and wants to move on and not deal with this. And I wonder if McGoohan at that point was because keep in mind, he was a major star in England. He was also he was part of in the 50s, he was part of the I think it was called the kitchen sink drama movement in England, which was more, instead of grand Shakespearean notices, they're more like down to earth, like literally a guy in his kitchen complaining about society. It's too bad Patrick's not here because he probably knows this better than I do. But he had that he was a genius. He was he had a different style. He was part of a hit television show. He was offered James Bond twice. He was also a devout Catholic, so which meant that certain things in the outside world bothered him. He was against using guns on screen. He'll punch a guy out, like he will, but he won't use a gun. He didn't believe in romantic scenes with women, which if you watch a lot of 1960s television, relatively sanitized. So he's got all this stuff that he's dealing with, and this may have been his big, I'm in a position to do this, I might as well do this now. I think this episode reveals a lot about his character as much as it does number 6. And I think it also really, with the series, serves as an emotional capstone. Like, it brings everything together. And we can talk about this with Fallout, but it really feels like I kind of feel like there should be. I'd like to see the band of parallel time, to use a Dark Shadows term, where McGowan, instead of writing Fallout, he figures, okay, we're going to keep Once Upon a Time as the final episode, but he does a prelude episode where you kind of see. It's almost like the build up for a wrestling match, where you see McGowan gradually starting to become more like the people who run the village, and you see number two, Leo Kern's number two, slowly become feeling like he's a prisoner. That's like no, because there's you'd have that great, and I think this episode is trying to set that up, but it doesn't do it that well in context, which is number 6 is just acting out. Like he goes to a guy and basically just like yells at him, whereas number 2 is like, hey, I am not a prisoner here. I want this. And I think setting that up would have made this really a capstone. And it would have made people angry the way Fallout did. But I think having this as the final episode just brings everything to a close, because ultimately number 1 is irrelevant.
Mm.
You know, whoever runs the village is irrelevant. It's not about that. It's about a guy who makes a decision and is constantly being challenged on it.
Yeah, he is. I mean, every episode he's constantly being challenged, and again, it's a really interesting series, and I like how the fact that in this episode too, you get all the little, for every little bit of emotion you get the physicality with it, which is a lot of fun for this episode. What's something with this episode that shocked you most?
I think seeing that blood, because I don't remember seeing it when I watched it when I was younger, and I wasn't looking for it. You know, it wasn't like I was looking. I'm not, when I watch something, I don't like look for Easter eggs or little hints. I just kind of watch it in total. But the fact that I noticed the blood, again, maybe that was fake, maybe that was real, but that was shocking because I heard the stories, but having that evidence and not being sure that was, because McKern's character even says, well, you missed. After saying, kill me, come on, kill. You can do it, boy. You can't do it because you're scared. Kill me. And then to have that happen and to see the blood, it's like, okay, did he know that blood was there? Was that what maybe triggered him to have his incident? But yeah, that was the one that really shocked me, because everything else you can kind of go, it's situation, it's acting, something like that. It's kind of like the recent shooting on Rust. You know, it's, if a gun went off, you don't necessarily think about it. But the fact that somebody died, or like Brandon Lee and The Crow, where basically they hadn't cleaned the gun enough, so you had like, it was basically, he was actually a better example would be, have you heard of an actor named John Eric Hexum?
Yes.
Okay. He basically was goofing around with a gun with blanks, and he put it to his head as, okay, here's my shot, without realizing that there's still gunpowder in a blank, and it will drive the paper wad deep enough where you can die. And I think that this is where, and Patrick did a really good job about explaining safety, and I think everything else you can explain through acting, but when you see blood, that means it bleep got real.
Yeah, with Brandon Lee's incident, his and the Rust thing, I'll get into the Rust in here in a second. But with Brandon Lee's, the bullet that hit him acted like a hollow point, and had it just been a stray bullet, he might have lived. But the fact that what happened is just sucks. And as far as the Rush shooting, I find it very, again, Alec Baldwin sort of hung himself with his own interview when he said, well, I had the gun at half cocked and I let the hammer go. I'm thinking, here's a guy who's been around guns, and when there's 3 phases of a hammer. There's the rest phase where it's in the thing. There's half cocked and there's fully cocked. Now, when a hammer is at half cocked and you just let it go with your thumb, it'll still go off. Now, if you take your thumb and you slowly place it back in place, it won't go off. And Alec Baldwin knew this and knows that, and he still let it go.
Yeah, I mean, that's why you have, as Patrick explained, that's why you have people to actually handle that. And the
Yeah.
fact that McGowan either didn't or maybe just said, you know what, I am a tour. I don't need it. And that's why, like I said, that scene, the fact that there's actual blood shocked me because normally in TV, and it didn't look like fake TV blood. It looked like, so I'm not sure if it was fake or if it was real. But yeah, that's the scene that shocked me.
I think
Well, it shocked all of us. I'm home, by the way. Are we
Yay, Patrick's
Good
home.
job.
still on?
Yeah, we're still.
Juicy.
Yep.
Okay, cool.
I think what shocked me
Where-
most with this is the physicality. I mean, just
Who it
the
was.
physicality of McGowan and McKern, and especially McGowan. I mean, he goes. I mean, I know the next episode is Fallout, but he goes all out in this episode.
It does go all.
It's just something else. It really is.
Well, that's probably when he was told, Patrick, we're cutting your budget. You need to end this soon. He's like, oh man, and just, oh okay, there's Leo McKern. Let me just dump my stuff on him.
Sure. Leo the Dumper is what they called him in the studio at that time. Leo Von Dump. Dumping stuff. The Dumpmeister. Hang on. Hang on.
The
I-
Dumpmeister, Mr. Dumpy, making copies.
Did you think of 14 actors, Gordon, for number 2?
Well, I thought it was 12, so I got 12 right here.
Okay, 12's good. 12's good.
Okay, and some of these we discussed before. So
Yes.
I've got Shora Agadashu, who played Christian on The Expanse, Adrian Lester from Hustle, Ian McShane
Nice.
from Deadwood, Viola Davis.
Yes.
I'm still including the Maz as a wrestler. That is the hill I will die on. He might not be a good number 2, but he'd be a fun number 2.
Yeah.
Saul Rubinek. I don't know if you're familiar. Have you ever watched a show called Warehouse 13?
Yes.
Artie.
Okay. Yeah, I know who that is.
Thayer David, because why not? I mean, yes, he's dead, but
Right.
we'll invent time travel and bring him. Rachel Sterling, who is a British actress. She's also Diana Rigg's daughter. She's done a bunch of stuff, so she'd be, Avery Brooks.
Yeah.
Again, he's passed on, but Lance Reddick.
Okay, I'm out.
John Noble, and let me. I want to do a side conversation with Mark Perry. Mark, if you're listening, if you're going to have Stokes in Dark Shadows reincarnation, hire John Noble. That's the best thing you can do.
I think it's taking place in the present, so it would have to be some descendant of Stokes.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If you have a Stokes-like character, make it John Noble.
Who's John Noble?
He was in Fringe. He's also Moreland Holmes in Elementary. Let me look up his credits.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can pull. He was in Return of the King.
Okay.
Let's see. I'm trying to think if trying to see if these. Yeah, he's one of those guys where you look at him and you go, "Oh yeah, it's that guy." But he's got a very noble. He's from, I think, Australia or New Zealand, but he has a very noble voice. Trying to think. He was in 24, Journeyman. I'm not sure he's in anything you might have seen, but he's worth.
Yeah, these are all things I've never seen.
Okay.
All right.
But no, I would say he's definitely worth it. And then for my final number 2, Alexander Siddig.
Very nice.
So you've got
Oh.
Avery Brooks and Alexander Siddig from DS9.
Yeah.
Patrick, did you select 14 people?
14 people to play number 2.
Yes.
Okay. Let's see. Gavin McLeod,
Yeah.
Richard Cole, I would say Al Roker. That's 3.
Let me guess your next one. Richard Kind?
No, don't be ridiculous. No, come on. I'm trying to be serious. Mindy Cohn. If she were around Wendy Jo Sperber, how many am I up to?
You're up to 5.
Kenneth Mars. Do they have to be active in the industry now?
No.
Thank goodness. Okay, great. Then I would say Jonathan Harris, of course. That's actually a good one. Gene Rayburn, Alan Suze, but the guy saying Big Bad John, Jimmy Dean. What am I up to now?
10.
10. Let's see. Paul Schaefer.
11.
Really, Paul?
Yeah. Yeah.
No.
This is not your
Unacceptable.
cast, Gordon. It's mine. I can have Paul Schaefer if I want. Paul Schaefer, Doc Severinsen, Tommy Newsom.
Okay,
and
Doc Severinsen
Milton
makes
DeLugg.
up for it. So good
And
call.
Milton DeLugg.
Very nice. All right. Michael Desmarais
Yeah, I do.
from MacGyver.
Car.
Yeah.
He's
And
soft.
Jamie Lee.
Patterson. He's a Dark Shadows vet.
What's that?
Is that right?
What's that?
Michael DeBar? I don't think so.
That's Sheriff Patterson.
No, Michael Desmarais is the guy who played Murdoch in MacGyver.
The A-Team?
No. He played Murdoch in MacGyver.
Oh, yeah. Okay, that thing.
He was a sinner.
Uh-huh.
Patrick, I think you're thinking of Michael Cavanaugh, who was the sheriff in Dark Shadows 91.
Oh, man, I didn't say Dark Shadows 91. Dana Elcar.
Oh, okay. I didn't hear the Dana Elcar part. I thought you were saying Michael DeBar was the sheriff.
No. I would only talk about Pamela DeBar.
Okay.
She's with the band.
Jamie Lee Curtis would be another number 2 of mine. Let's see who else. Gabriel Anwar, Jeffrey Donovan, Bruce Campbell. I think I'm up to 5. And I'm trying to think who else.
Jeffrey Combs.
Yeah, Jeffrey Combs. Another person I would use is actually James Jude Courtney, and without the Michael Myers mask, because he's a tall dude, and I would like to just see him in something else other than stunt work. Another guy, trying to think of Taylor Maine, another tall dude. I'll have him.
I think this height thing is important.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Actors that can play that part.
Yes. Hugh Laurie, who played House. And let me see. For number 2, I would have Stone Cold Steve Austin, the wrestler. He has done movies, some pretty good too. Let me see what else. I love Dwayne The Rock Johnson, but I would not have him. But
gotta have some standards in this, and I think you're really establishing them.
Well, here's the thing. When I first saw The Rock become The Rock and he picked up a microphone, everybody said the same thing the next day at school: movie star. So like you knew he was going to eventually go into movies. Again, youth of our time. But with number 2, who was the one after? Oh, Tim Daly from Wings would be a good number 2. I think he could be very evil at times or play it. John Lithgow would be another one. and I don't know what I'm up to. So
Gentle two.
what's that?
He's a gentle number two, a smooth number two, passes easily, but
And
ultimately make a splash.
a very cocky. If I had to cast a very cocky number two, I would cast another wrestler. Even though I've only seen him in video clips, but he's very good as a heel. MJF would be my pick.
I get him confused with Sir Derek Jacobi. Now, which
MJF. Now,
one?
I've never seen him wrestle or do a promo. The only promos I've seen are on YouTube, so because I don't watch AEW. He's their champion now. He's a heel. His name is Maxwell something Friedman, and he's an arrogant asshole.
Well, I think Kinky Friedman would make a great number two.
Josh Andrew Friedman as number two, and along with Dr. Milton Friedman and Dr. Sidney Freeman, who you remind me of sometimes, Gordon. I think, Gordon, honestly, if they fused you and me, you would get Dr. Sidney Freeman.
You know, I could believe that.
Do you know who we're talking about, Joel?
No.
He's the psychiatrist on MASH who doesn't show up nearly enough.
Oh.
But every time he does, you love him. And he's played by an actor named Alan Arbus, who was just marvelous. And Alan Arbus was married to Dion Arbus, who was one of the wildest, weirdest photographers ever in the 20th century. And what a couple they must have made.
And since we can use any actor from an era, Renee Auberjonois, who played Odo, would be another number two if he were alive. But
Vincent D'Onofrio would make a great number two.
Vincent D'Onofrio would. Yeah, he would.
Herbert Lom.
There's another actor who I know he hosted the Twilight Zone, and he's my pick, but I forget his name offhand.
Oh, who are you talking about? Forrest Whitaker?
Yes.
Yeah. I know you love Vincent D'Onofrio. His name keeps coming up whenever my head appears.
And I think that's all I got. So you guys had a great list. I think we had it.
So I guess I should. I think from now on I should start making references to George Romero because when Patrick's around, because he has more of that vibe.
You know, I've got the glasses right over here.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, that's all I'm saying. But yeah, I mean, so we're talking about more number twos. You got Mike Henry. You got Mike Henry. You've got Jackie Gleason. You've got Pat McCormick. You've got Jerry Reed and Paul Williams. And that's five, and they were all in Smokey and the Bandit.
Mm-hmm.
So you know, let's just we go with that.
And personally, I would love to, if you have Stone Cold Steve Austin as number two, you have a 90s era football player, Brian Bosworth, also known as the Boz, as one of the members of the Village, because I would like to see Stone Cold Steve Austin beat him with a metal folding chair. Because Boz was obnoxious.
If we can have, I want to see Jocko, the Energizer guy. Remember, Energizer. It'll surprise you. Who was also on The Highwaymen with Sam J. Jones and Jane Badler.
You know who?
NBC.
You know who would have made a really interesting number six? The late Brian Pillman. You ever see him?
Constantly. No, I have no idea who you're talking about.
Well, I'll send you a video clip of a skit he was in with Stone Cold Steve Austin. It's intense. But he was a wrestler for WCW and WWF, and he actually ended up in a car accident, crushing his leg, and he had to rehab his leg. He only wrestled like a couple matches before he passed away on a young age, unfortunately.
We're talking about, you know, actors who crushed their legs in accidents. We got to talk about Jeffrey Scott.
Yeah.
Jeffrey Scott, the ultimate number two.
Yes. Yeah. Sky Rumson. He would have been a good number two too. I mean,
In many ways, he was.
yeah, he did a really good job as that character. I love his portrayal of Sky. It's amazing.
Uh,
Um,
I wrote my favorite obituary, strangely enough, was for Jeffrey Scott. That's in Daybook Unbound. Because I was trying to make up for a terrible thing, and I think maybe I did. That was I felt like that was a privilege to write that, and from the impression I get, he was a really nice guy.
yeah. Here's another actor for Jonathan Frid would have made a really great number two. Um, for The Prisoner.
Hmm?
There's so many Dark Shadows cast members you could put in there. Laura Parker, God, you could put the whole cast of DS as a number two.
Dark Shadows cast members, yeah, I mean that immediately qualifies them
So,
for it. Boy, 70s Nimoy.
yeah.
If we, In Search of era, Baffled era, Leonard Nimoy.
You know who'd have been a really good number two?
This is going to go all night. No, Joel, who would have made a really good number two?
Charles Bronson.
Sure, Charles Bronson, Charles Nelson Riley, Charlton Heston, Charlie Callis. Charlie Bucket.
Good. Scott's, well, actually, 1998 Scott Steiner from WCW would have made a great number two, because he would just use cuss promos right at number 6 and just cut promos repeatedly at him, and none of those promos would be written down or by a writer. They would just be off the cuff by him. And then he would use his mathematics from the TNA days, which was just a funny promo.
To any viewers who've ever expressed, about the Dark Shadows Daybook, because my references are obscure or my language choices are not, what they use in their everyday lingo or whatever. I just want you to know, cultural obscurity is really relative. And if you ever want to see me in a place where I haven't the faintest clue what someone is talking about, but by God, I love them anyway, and I support them, and I learn something every time they explain it further, which is why I ask, and I'm happy to be there. And I'm happy to say when I don't know what something means or what something is, it's me hanging out with Jewel and listening to wrestling stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay,
Jewel, when you make these references, because it's not part of my world, and that's the only way you grow is by being exposed to new things. So thank you, and keep them coming.
Well, in TNA, Scott Steiner, when he went to TNA, he had this promo for the upcoming pay-per-view Sacrifice, and he used this he goes, you see, if you go one-on-one with me, you got a 50-50 shot at winning, but I'm a genetic freak, and I'm not normal. And he goes, so at the TNA pay-per-view at Sacrifice, you got a 33.3% chance of winning. And he did all this weird math, and he goes, the numbers don't lie, Joe. And I'm thinking, you just made up the numbers, dude. Like, of course they don't lie. You just made them up. And it's just like, so I'll send you the clip because I can't remember it all, but it's short. So it's funny though what he says, because none of it's written down. It's just from his mind.
Joel, who is Joe?
Joe is Samoa Joe. He was in TNA for years.
Okay. What is the frequency, Kenneth? Those will be my last words. Who is Joe?
Scott Steiner has a real life brother, Rick Steiner. They were the Steiner brothers for years as a tag team. Crazy. Okay. They would suplex you whether you wanted them to or not.
Now, what is
a suplex? Is where somebody picks you up off your feet and throws you across the ring on your back.
Is it where Their hand in between the meat potatoes there? Is it when they
The hands are wrapped around your belly, around your waist,
okay.
and you get tossed. Quite literally.
Sure you do.
Tossed. Yeah. By the way, again, the Sid Justice video I'll send you guys is not pretty, so be wary. But is there anything you guys want to add about Once Upon a Time before we get on out of here?
It's a great moment of television. There was a lot of suffering to create it. But now that that's all said and done, we can't do anything to erase that. Sorry, Leo. We do have an amazing document of not just art, but in the experience. I mean, it's almost like the Jackson Pollock serious experience of making art right there. But it's television. I mean, it's scary as hell, but sometimes you got to do things that scare you.
Right, and the fact that Leo McKern went on to play Rumpel of the Bailey, he was taken care of. I think he won, and I think he got the best out of that situation.
Yeah, but the Old Man in Blue Lagoon with Brooke Shields and Christopher Evans, later star of the pirate movie, which featured the song "Pumpin' and Blowin'."
Yeah. It even after this, it's not like McGowan's career really hurts. I mean, he goes on to do other things. So I do think this series, The Prisoner, did become his legacy. I mean, he spoofed it in The Simpsons, which was fun. I watched that episode recently.
And it's good to see him, show a sense of affectionate humor about there.
I found it really, like, when I was watching that documentary today on Tubi, he turns to the camera and he's like, "Be seeing you," and then he somehow tracked the documentary crew down to where they were staying and demanded the film back. I'm like, Jesus Christ.
I think he hid in their trunk. He was with them the whole time.
I believe it. I mean, I don't know how else.
That would be a McGowan move to do.
Totally. The excruciating pain of being balled up in that trunk for 3 hours, nothing to that guy. That's
yeah, he's probably like, hey, you know what? I had to work with Darren Nesbitt, so yeah, nothing's.
The most honest moment of acting by Patrick McGowan's in the next episode when he rips off that monkey mask and just, that's the real deal.
Well, that's probably that was probably written in like an amphetamine driven haze. He's down in Bourbon and taking speeders like, because we can talk about this when we talk about Fallout, but it's a script that really feels. You can tell it was written in a rush.
Script written. Okay.
I'm playing fast and loose with the English language, but it's more like he's got his pad of paper and a crayon. He's like, okay, we do the monkey thing, and then we do the rocket, and we do this, and we do that.
This is all as Joan Embry from the San Diego Zoo is headed over the tranquilizer gun to finally take him down.
Like, I'll say this though about Paul. It's a crazy episode though. I mean, it's crazier than this one.
Sometimes I've shown people that episode and told them it was the first episode of The Prisoner.
Yeah, I think I can easily say with no argument that watching Fallout, it's like being on an acid trip without actually taking acid.
If you took acid and watched Fallout, it would make sense. It would be lucid. It would be like, watching Louis Rukeyser's Wall Street Week. Because it would cancel itself out.
Right.
See, Angel Farage thinks Todd Tarantula is Tripoli. We got to show him The Prisoner.
I'm sure he's. I have no doubt. Are you talking Ansel?
Yeah, you got to show him the last episode of The Prisoner.
And the end of the world. Yeah.
Oh my God.
But a phrase I have used time and again in my life, man, that made as much sense as the last episode of The Prisoner.
I've seen wrestling matches and just as weird. especially in WCW.
I've had dates end that just as weirdly. So we'll just leave that there.
Lord.
Guys, it's been a lot of fun about this episode. I really do think that McGurn and Magoon did a really, really good job. I mean, I know, again, his health wasn't the greatest, but he was a trooper in this episode. He really was, McKern. But guys, first of all, I want to thank you for joining me for The Prisoner. It's been a blast. What's our next episode?
Fallout.
Fallout. When do you guys want to do Fallout, Jordan?
Who want? I can't wait.
Let's see. Let's see. I'm good tomorrow night, Tuesday night. I'm good Thursday night. Wednesday night's a little iffy. And Friday night I'm not available.
Tuesday's good for me. Patrick?
Tuesday.
Be seeing you, gentlemen. Be
seeing you.
Be seeing you.
Have a good night, guys.
Good night, all.
Links are going to be in the description box for these Tuesday episodes. As always. Good night.